Earth is a colossal mass of rock and metal, weighing nearly 6 sextillion tons. It has floated in the vacuum of space for 4.5 billion years, shaped by a cold, predictable, and relentless physics. For most of us, the ground beneath our feet is the ultimate symbol of solidity. We look at mountains, valleys, and deserts and see a static landscape made of gray, brown, and predictable tones. A concrete reality that blindly obeys the rules of visual logic. But the truth is that our planet hides geological secrets that seem designed to mock our senses. In certain isolated corners of the globe, the combination of extreme pressures, bizarre chemical reactions, and evolutionary isolation has created landscapes so absurd that the human brain, upon looking at them, instantly short-circuits. These are environments that do not feel real. They look like feverish hallucinations, bugs in the texture of the world, or backdrops brought straight from a mind under the influence of psychedelic substances. What happens when local physics deforms to the point of turning a mountain into a crayon painting, or making the ground disappear into an infinite mirror? How can Earth's chemistry create waters that glow with a living light without electricity, or waterfalls that pour a liquid as red as blood into a desert of absolute ice? How far can Earth's geological design of our planet go to make us question our own sanity? To understand how Earth manages to create illusions that challenge our understanding of reality, we need to look beyond the surface. Welcome to Nature's Top 10. Today, we are going to explore 10 geological locations so hallucinatory, so unbelievable and unique that they will make you question if you are still on planet Earth. And our journey begins at the top of the world, in a desert of eternal ice where the Earth itself seems to have suffered a mortal wound, expelling a liquid that defies both biology and the chemistry of extreme survival. Deep within the Taylor Glacier, in one of the coldest, driest, and most isolated regions of Antarctica, the pristine white ice is violently severed by a macabre sight, a waterfall pouring a blood-red liquid, staining the landscape in a deeply unsettling way. Looking at blood falls triggers an instant alarm in our brains. It looks as though the Earth itself is bleeding through an open wound in the ice. If you are wondering whether it is possible to swim in this bizarre water, the practical answer is a resounding no. Beyond the fact that the location is an extremely restricted, hard-to-reach scientific preservation zone, the temperature there is freezing, and the water's composition is incredibly hostile. But the true mystery that baffled scientists for over a century was not accessibility, but chemistry. How does this water remain liquid below freezing, and why does it look like something out of a horror movie? The answer reveals one of the most stunning and bizarre survival mechanisms on the planet, hidden inside an ecosystem that has been sealed off from the rest of the world for nearly 2 million years. It all began when an ancient body of salt water was swallowed by the advance of a massive glacier. Trapped in total darkness, starved of oxygen, and under crushing pressure, this underground reservoir became a chemical time capsule. The water there is 3 times saltier than the ocean, which prevents it from freezing even at sub-zero temperatures. As this pressurized brine finds a crack in the ice and escapes to the surface, an instantaneous chemical reaction occurs. The water is extremely rich in iron, and the moment it touches the oxygen in our atmosphere, the iron oxidizes immediately. In simple terms, the water rusts on the spot, taking on that viscous crimson hue. Yet the ultimate biological hallucination of this place lies in what lives inside this subterranean trap. Scientists discovered that despite being isolated from the sun and photosynthesis for eons, colonies of extremophile bacteria learned to survive there by breathing iron and metabolizing sulfate. It is an ecosystem that shattered all the rules of modern biology, proving that life can thrive in the absolute void using nothing but the raw chemistry of rocks. Blood Falls shows us how iron and oxidation can create a visual horror scene using a single color against white ice. But what if Earth's oxidation and minerals decided to abandon all sobriety to create an entire mountain range that looks like it was painted with every color of the rainbow, completely defying our perception of what a mountain should be? If you were to take a crayon of every available color and scrape them across the slopes of an entire mountain range, the result would be Zhangye. Known worldwide as the Rainbow Mountains, they offer a landscape that looks like a technicolor hallucination. Perfect stripes of red, green, yellow, blue, and orange cut through the peaks and valleys with a precision that defies common sense. It looks like the kind of scenery you would see in a fantasy video game, or after a glitch in your computer's graphics card. If your first reaction upon seeing this place is a desire to run across these colorful hills or slide down their slopes, reality imposes a strict limit. You absolutely cannot step on the rock. The park is heavily protected, and tourists are required to walk exclusively on elevated wooden boardwalks. The reason is that the soil is incredibly fragile. A single human footprint can take decades to be erased by natural erosion, destroying a design that took eons to be drawn. How did nature manage to transform solid rock into such an absurdly colorful and geometric masterpiece? The secret behind this visual mirage is a mineral sandwich crushed by plate tectonics over the course of 24 million years. Before the mountains existed, the region was a flat sedimentary basin. Different types of sandstone, gravel, and minerals were deposited in layers, one on top of the other, like pages of a geological history book. Each color we see today represents a different climatic condition and a specific mineral from the past. The deep red bands come from iron oxide. The greenish ones are the result of metallic sulfides, and the yellow tones are born from limonite. The ultimate hallucination occurred when the Indian tectonic plate collided with Asia, pushing the ground upward with colossal force. This impact not only raised the mountains, but tilted the mineral sandwich at bizarre angles. Over millennia, wind and rain stripped away the top layers of Earth, exposing the colorful strata below and creating the psychedelic labyrinth we see today. The mountains of Zhangye use solid minerals and the force of tectonic plates to create an illusion of static colors that seem to float beneath the Chinese sun. But what happens when the geological illusion stops being about color and begins to be about space itself? How can nature use salt and water to create a plane so perfectly flat that it makes the ground simply disappear, transforming the world into an infinite mirror where you no longer know where the Earth ends and the sky begins? For most of the year, the Salar de Uyuni is a white, dry, and infinitely barren salt flat stretching across more than 10,000 square kilometers in the Bolivian Andes. The salt crust is so thick that it forms perfect hexagonal patterns on the ground, making you feel as though you were walking across a desert of white ceramic. But it only takes a thin layer of water to coat this surface during the rainy season, between January and March, for local physics to completely break down. The ground transforms into the largest mirror on the planet. Those who visit the Salar during this period do not exactly go to swim, as the water only accumulates a few centimeters deep over the solid salt. Instead, they go to walk on the sky. The effect of spatial disorientation is so violent it borders on psychedelia. With no visible horizon line, heaven and earth merge. You lose all sense of depth and are left with the distinct hallucinatory sensation of floating in the middle of outer space, surrounded by clouds both above and beneath your feet. This geographical mirage forces us to ask, how can a plane be so perfectly flat that it does not distort the reflection of the sky by a single centimeter? The answer reveals the level of perfection geology can achieve when it has time to spare. About 40,000 years ago, this entire area was covered by a complex of massive prehistoric lakes. When these lakes dried up due to climate shifts, they didn't just leave sand behind. They left a monumental amount of dissolved minerals. As the water evaporated, Earth's own gravity leveled the liquid brine in a perfectly uniform manner before it solidified. The result is a plain with an altitude variance of less than 1 meter across its entire expanse. The precision is so absurd that space agencies use the Salar de Uyuni to calibrate the altimeters of their satellites in orbit. In addition to containing the world's largest lithium deposit, a critical element for the batteries of our future, the Salar functions as an extreme survival ecosystem. In the summer, it serves as a breeding ground for thousands of James's flamingos, which defy the hypersaline water to feed on microscopic algae beneath the salt. The Salar de Uyuni uses perfect symmetry and a sheet of water to erase the borders of the horizon in a desert of salt. But what happens when nature decides to take the vastness of a desert, sculpt impossibly perfect white sand dunes, and flood the valleys between them with thousands of crystal-clear, life-filled freshwater lagoons, creating a shifting blue and white labyrinth that changes shape every single year? If you were to fly blind and land in the middle of the Lençóis Maranhenses, your brain would instantly plunge into a survival conflict. Before your eyes stretches a monumental desert of blindingly white sand dunes. But as you walk between them, you do not face death by thirst. The valleys between the dunes are flooded with thousands of lagoons of perfectly crystal-clear water, shifting between shades of turquoise blue and emerald green. It is a living mirage, a desert that refuses to be dry. Unlike other highly hostile places on our list, here you not only can, but should swim. Diving into these warm, pure freshwater lagoons, surrounded by towering walls of white sand shifting with the wind, is one of the most unbelievable and floatiest experiences terrestrial geography can offer. Yet the true mystery challenging all logic is not visual, it is biological. How do these lagoons form on top of sand without the water being immediately swallowed by the ground? And how are there fish swimming in pools of water that completely vanish during the dry season? It all comes down to an annual tug-of-war between the equatorial climate and subterranean geology. Although it looks like a desert, the Lençóis region receives a massive amount of rainfall during the first half of the year. The water does not instantly drain away because right beneath the surface layer of sand lies an impermeable layer of rock that prevents the water from sinking into the deep water table. The rainwater gets trapped in these valleys, birthing the lagoons. The survival mechanism of the creatures inhabiting this ephemeral landscape is even more jaw-dropping. When the dry season arrives, the harsh sun evaporates most of the lagoons, turning the area back to a desert of dry sand. To avoid death, fish species like the wolffish or the tamawata enter a state of strict dormancy. They burrow deep into the damp sand remaining in the lower layers, enveloping themselves in subterranean mud where oxygen is minimal. They reduce their metabolism almost to zero and wait. When the rains return months later and the lagoons re-emerge, these fish wake up and colonize the waters once more, as if they had resurrected from the sand itself. The Lençóis Maranhenses use fresh rainwater and pristine sand to create a comforting, life-filled labyrinth. But if we cross the Atlantic, we'll discover the absolute polar opposite of this serenity. What happens when the water bubbling up from the ground is not fresh and refreshing, but a boiling, neon, acid soup coughed up by underground volcanoes at the lowest and most dangerous point of the entire African continent? If you were to land in Dallol with your eyes closed and suddenly open them, your first reaction would be to gasp for air and immediately regret it. Before you, there is no soil, grass, or ordinary rock. What you see is a psychedelic desert composed of bubbling hot springs in shades of neon yellow, fluorescent green, and blood red, surrounded by salt sculptures that seem conceived by a feverish mind. The scenery looks like the surface of a highly toxic alien moon. If you felt any impulse to swim or touch these colorful pools that look like magic potions, dismiss that idea instantly. Stepping into the water in Dallol means instant death or severe chemical burns. The place is not only the hottest inhabited spot on the planet, with temperatures easily exceeding 45 degrees Celsius or 113 degrees Fahrenheit in the shade, but its pools are made of a boiling soup of hydrochloric acid and hypersaturated brine. The surrounding air is thick with toxic sulfur gases, and tourists are only allowed to visit accompanied by armed guards, walking with extreme caution so as not to break the thin crust of salt and sink their feet into pure acid. How does Earth's chemistry manage to create such a dangerously colorful and destructive hellscape? It all comes down to a violent encounter between rainwater and the magma of an underground volcano located below sea level in the Danxia Depression. Rainwater seeps deep into the earth and comes in direct contact with pockets of boiling magma. This superheated water dissolves the massive deposits of salt and potassium minerals present in the subsoil. Under colossal pressure, the mixture is coughed back up to the surface through thermal geysers. When this acidic, salty solution emerges and meets the air, the water evaporates almost instantly due to the extreme desert heat. What remains are the purified minerals crystallizing in real time. Sulfur creates the brilliant yellow tones, while copper and oxidized iron generate the deep greens and rich reds. Scientists have discovered that in this environment, it is so extreme that in some of its pools, life is simply impossible. Not even the most resilient extremophile bacteria on the planet can survive there. It is chemical sterility in its purest, most beautiful form. Dallol uses deep underground volcanic heat and salt to create acidic springs that destroy any form of life in Africa. But what happens when humanity, by accident, drills into the desert floor and unleashes a geothermal force that decides to build its own living fortress of minerals, creating a triple alien geyser that spews water endlessly in the middle of nowhere? In the middle of Nevada's Black Rock Desert stands a structure that looks like it was left behind by a spaceship. Fly Geyser looks nothing like any geyser you've seen in Iceland or Yellowstone. It is a mini fortress of molten-looking rock with 3 spouts that endlessly spew boiling water nearly 2 meters into the air, completely coated in shocking layers of lime green and orange red. If you've already started planning your trip to take a dip in the warm pools forming around it, that swim will have to wait. Fly Geyser sits on private property currently owned by the Burning Man Project. Access is strictly controlled, walks are guided, and the water jetting from the cones comes out at around 93 degrees Celsius, 200 degrees Fahrenheit, a temperature that would cook human skin in seconds. But the great secret of this geological bizarre feature isn't its temperature. It's the fact that this monster was accidentally created by humanity. The history behind this visual hallucination began in 1964 when a geothermal energy company drilled into the desert searching for hot water to generate electricity. The well didn't fit their plans, so they capped it. However, the job was poorly done. The seal couldn't withstand the monumental pressure of the underground reservoir, and the hot water began to leak continuously. The geological magic happened over the following decades. As the superheated groundwater rose, it carried a massive amount of dissolved calcium carbonate and silica. The moment this solution touched the desert air, the minerals solidified instantly around the well, like plaster. Year after year, drop by drop, the geyser built its own shell of limestone rock, which keeps growing to this day. The neon colors covering the structure actually don't come from the minerals, but from a fascinating biological survival mechanism. The rock cones were colonized by thermophilic algae and cyanobacteria, extremophile microorganisms that not only survive in near boiling water, but use the heat and sunlight to photosynthesize, painting the living rock with these psychedelic hues. Fly Geyser uses human error and constant heat to accumulate minerals and build a colorful fortress that spews water without stopping. But what happens when summer heat does the absolute opposite, evaporating the water of an entire lake until it turns into a patchwork of colorful circular pools, separated by natural salt walkways where you can walk among minerals that are both therapeutic and lethal? If you drive along the highway cutting through the Okanagan Valley in British Columbia and look out the window during the summer, you will think your eyes are playing tricks on you. Spotted Lake, known traditionally by the Syilx First Nations people as Kliluk, completely transforms during the hottest months of the year. Instead of an ordinary body of water, what emerges is a psychedelic patchwork made of hundreds of colorful circular pools separated by natural walkways of white and yellow salt that look like scars on the earth. If you felt the urge to hop from puddle to puddle or take a dip in these colorful circles, you hit an impassable limit. You cannot swim, and you cannot even step onto the lake bed. The area is fenced off and strictly protected for two very clear reasons. First, it has been a sacred medicinal site for Canadian First Nations for millennia. Second, the chemical composition here is bizarre and hazardous. The water in these pools is one of the densest, most mineral-concentrated solutions on the planet, packed with incredibly high levels of magnesium sulfate, calcium, and sodium sulfates. Touching this concentrated chemical soup under the harsh sun can cause severe skin irritation. How does nature manage to draw hundreds of perfect, colorful circles inside a single lake? The mechanism behind this geometric illusion is an annual cycle of extreme evaporation. During the winter and spring, the lake looks perfectly normal, filled with water draining from the surrounding mountains. However, this water carries tons of minerals washed away from the rocks. Because the lake has no outlet to rivers or the sea, all those minerals become trapped inside, settling at the bottom. When the summer heat hits the valley, most of the water evaporates into the air. As the water level plummets, the different minerals begin to concentrate in pockets and crystallize, forming the hardened salt walls that create the pathways between the circles. The color of each individual spot, ranging from shades of green and yellow to blue and gray, depends exclusively on the type of mineral dominating that specific pool and the amount of sunlight hitting the lake bed. If there is more magnesium sulfate, the pool turns greenish. If calcium takes over, it leans toward gray. Spotted Lake uses desert evaporation and sulfate chemistry to create a geometric mosaic of static mineral circles. But what happens when the visual phenomenon doesn't come from the death and evaporation of water, but rather from an explosion of plant life that transforms an entire river into a liquid, biological rainbow, where the waters seem to pulse in shades of red and pink beneath the tropical rainforest? Hidden in the transition zone between the Amazon rainforest and the Andes Mountains lies a body of water known worldwide as the River of Five Colors, or the Liquid Rainbow. Looking at Caño Cristales during the second half of the year is an experience that challenges our entire understanding of tropical biology. The riverbed ceases to be made of ordinary rocks and sand, transforming instead into a pulsing carpet of blood-red, hot pink, green, blue, and yellow tones. It looks as though someone spilled a palette of fluorescent paint directly into the current. If your first reaction is to jump right into this explosion of color, you should know that you can swim there, but under environmental restrictions that border on the extreme. To dive into Caño Cristales, you are completely forbidden from wearing sunscreen, insect repellent, or any kind of body lotion. The reason is that this ecosystem is surgically fragile. Any artificial chemical compound in the water could wipe out the very life that paints the river. And the great secret of this spectacle is that, unlike almost every other place on our list, this visual hallucination is not caused by dead minerals or geological reactions, but by a living plant. The mystery behind the liquid rainbow goes by the name Macarenia clavigera. It is not an alga, but an endemic aquatic plant that lives latched onto the quartzitic rocks at the bottom of the river. During the high water season, the current runs too fast and deep, blocking sunlight from reaching the riverbed. During the extreme dry season, the water vanishes and the plant dies. The magic happens precisely in the brief window between the two seasons. When the water level drops to the perfect height, the current slows and the water becomes impossibly crystal clear, allowing sunbeams to saturate the riverbed. This bath of light triggers a defense and reproductive mechanism in the Macarenia clavigera. To protect itself from direct solar radiation, it drastically changes color, generating pigments that range from pale pink to deep crimson. Combined with the yellow sand, the blue reflections of the sky, and the green of the native vegetation, the river transforms into a moving optical illusion. Caño Cristales uses sunlight and the biology of an aquatic plant to turn a river into a liquid biological rainbow where the waters seem to pulse in shades of red and pink beneath the tropical rainforest. But what happens when we completely abandon the light of the sun and dive into the deep, dark depths of the earth? How can nature create a visual hallucination in a completely subterranean cave where the ceiling transforms into an artificial night sky, brilliant with thousands of living blue constellations created by creatures that use their own light to hunt in the absolute void? If you step into the depths of the Waitomo cave complex in New Zealand and turn off every single flashlight, your eyes will witness a total breakdown in the logic of what the underground should be. Instead of the absolute, suffocating pitch black of rocks, the cave ceiling instantly transforms into a starry night sky, glowing with thousands of points of a vivid, mesmerizing turquoise blue light. It is a cosmic hallucination beneath the earth. You know you are inside a cave, but your brain swears you are floating through outer space, staring at a distant galaxy. If you are thinking about jumping into the water to swim beneath this electric sky, the actual experience is a bit different. The water cutting through these limestone caves is extremely cold, and the ecosystem is rigidly managed. Tourists do not swim freely. Instead, they navigate silently in rubber boats, gliding through the total darkness while staring at the ceiling. Touching the walls, making noise, or taking flash photography is strictly forbidden, as the slightest stress can cause the lights to turn off. But what makes this natural masterpiece even more unsettling is knowing that each of these brilliant stars is actually a hungry, deadly trap. This biological mirage does not come from fluorescent minerals, but from a unique species of insect called Arachnocampa luminosa. The phenomenon begins when these gnats are still in their larval stage. To catch food in the total darkness of the cave, the larva fastens itself to the ceiling and builds a bizarre structure. It drops dozens of thin, vertical silk threads coated in droplets of sticky mucus, which hang down like strings of transparent beads. Once the web is set, the larva activates its chemical engineering mechanism. Through a reaction called bioluminescence, occurring inside an excretory organ in its tail, it produces a brilliant blue light. In the absolute darkness, insects living in the water below mistake this blue light for the starry night sky and fly toward it in an attempt to escape. The result is fatal. They crash into the sticky threads and become trapped. The larva above feels the vibration, reels the silk thread back up like a fisherman, and devours the prey alive. What our eyes perceive as a romantic, relaxing constellation is in reality a highly efficient biological killing field. The Waitomo cave uses biological hunger and deep darkness to create the illusion of a starry sky beneath the earth. But what happens when we leave the dark depths and return to the surface of the planet's most arid deserts, where the mystery involves neither light nor biology, but rather massive rocks weighing hundreds of pounds that seem to have gained a life of their own, walking by themselves and leaving perfectly drawn tracks in the dry mud without any human ever witnessing them move? In the heart of Death Valley, California, lies an incredibly isolated flat of dry, cracked mud called Racetrack Playa. At first glance, the place looks like an ordinary desert, barren and scorched by the sun. But when you look down at the ground, you are faced with one of the greatest geographical hallucinations on the planet. Dozens of heavy rocks, some weighing over 300 pounds, have long tracks carved into the soil behind them. Straight lines, perfect curves, and abrupt 90-degree turns prove the impossible. These stones are walking. If your first reaction upon discovering this place is a desire to pitch a tent right next to one of these rocks to catch the exact moment it takes its next step, the region's logistical reality imposes a strict limit. The location is extremely remote, with no cell service, no drinking water, and temperatures that swing from extreme heat to freezing cold in just a few hours. But the true mystery, which baffled scientists and fueled theories about aliens and magnetic fields for nearly a century, was a deeply unsettling fact. The tracks were there, but no one had ever seen the stones move in real life. How can solid, inert rocks walk for hundreds of meters without legs, without hurricane-force winds, and without the help of any living animal? The answer was only recently unlocked in 2014, when researchers installed GPS sensors and time-lapse cameras in the desert, revealing a physical engineering that borders on invisible perfection. The phenomenon relies on a surgical and rare combination of three elements: rain, ice, and wind. During the winter, rare storms flood the flat with a millimeter-thin layer of water. At night, the temperature plummets below freezing, causing this sheet of water to freeze into an incredibly thin but massive pane of ice, floating like glass over the mud. As the sun rises the next day, the ice begins to melt and break into large, floating panels. It is at this exact moment that the desert wind comes into play. Even light breezes blowing against these massive ice panels create a monumental drag force. The ice acts like a sailboat's sail, pushed by the wind, nudging the rock trapped within it and causing it to slide smoothly across the soft mud below. When the water completely dries up over the following days, the ice vanishes, leaving behind only the stone and its perfectly sculpted track on the dry ground. The sailing stones close our list by proving that nature doesn't need magic to make us question our own sanity. It needs only time, patience, and the purest laws of planetary physics. Earth shows us that the most alien environments in the universe are not light years away floating in outer space. They are right here, shaped by the unseen, relentless forces of our own planet. The ultimate question that remains is how many of these mind-bending secrets are still hiding in the dark, waiting to be discovered. Thank you for watching Nature's Top 10. If you enjoyed this journey into the impossible, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss our next exploration. See you next time.